Hey, everybody. We're about to start. I want to thank everybody so much for coming today. It is just an amazing crowd, and thank you for your support. Thank you for support of Joe Jorgensen, and also thank you for the support of the California Libertarian Party. If you're not yet a registered libertarian, or if you're not yet a member of the LPC, you can go to our website, which is ca.lp.org. I'm so happy to see everybody here, and I want to get all of you involved because after this amazing presidential run, we're going to have a lot of work to do because we have so many new libertarians. We are growing. Our registered libertarians are growing. Thank you. In 2 months, we went up like 6% in registered libertarians in the state, which is amazing. And we've got more registered libertarians and more Libertarian Party members than we have in at least the last 12 years. We've hit an all-time high. So thank you, everybody. So that's just a little bit about the California Party. So please support us as well. And Jo, she is helping the party grow. So, and I hear myself back, which is really beginning. It's a little difficult. Anyway, I'm not going to talk long, so the first thing I want to do is I want to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Supervisor Jeff Hewitt. He is the county yep, that's him. County Supervisor for Riverside County, which I believe is the 13th largest county in the country. 10th, oops, 10th, I screwed up, 10th largest. And he sorry. Hearing myself back is a little distracting. Anyway, without further ado, in addition to being the county supervisor, he is also a libertarian. He's run for other offices. He was the mayor of Calamasa, and he's on the National Libertarian Council. So he is a true blue libertarian. Thank you. Come on up, Jeff. Just step on my toe.
There we go. Okay, there is a delay. Thank you very much, Mimi. First of all, I'm going to tell you, 2 days ago, I was a featured speaker for a chamber event out in Beaumont, one of the 6 cities in my district, and it was set up with outdoor dining on 2 different directions. I was sitting at a podium, there was nobody directly in front of me, and finally I got to use that one skill that I've gained in the 10 years that I've been elected. I got to speak out of both sides of my mouth at the same time. Mimi called my wife a few days ago and said, we don't have very many people that have signed up for this event. Well, let me tell you about that. 2 weeks ago, I had a press conference that I was going to push along with Orange County Supervisor Don Wagner and San Diego County Supervisor Jim Desmond. And they're part of what's called Open California Now. And we put out a press release on Friday before it was going to be on Monday at 10 o'clock. And they asked me, get as many electeds as you can from your county also to show up. And we're going to hold this news conference, and we're going to tell the governor how important it is that we open back up and quit, locking everybody down and killing our economy. And when I got in there Monday morning, I met my chief of staff, Boomer, and it was 8 o'clock. I got there a couple hours early, and I said, Boomer, how many inquiries have we had from media? He said, Jeff, we haven't had any. I thought we were going to throw a party, and I had invited all these electeds to come to it, and nobody was going to show up, and nobody was going to know about it. Well, to make a long story short, by 9:30, we saw KBC news van pull in. Boomer and I said, we got TV, all right, And then we had Fox 11, we had Telemundo, 14 other electeds came, plus my county sheriff. It was a phenomenal show of force, and believe me, the governor took notice. That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that actually libertarians can lead Democrats and Republicans in, because when it comes down to common things, our values don't change. And so when Mimi was saying we don't have much people here, we've sold out, so we need a bigger boat. Come on, let's get a bigger boat. thank you to Bruheim Brewery for being gracious and hosting this. Your beers, especially your IPAs, are really good. Listen, I'm excited about this. I'm not supposed to speak very long, but I want to tell you that when I met Jo the first time, I was impressed. When she came from the pack and actually hard-won fight for this nomination, I'm really impressed. Every time I see her, I'm even more impressed. Think about having somebody in the Oval Office that's not going to throw us in another $3 or $4 trillion into debt, will actually make prudent decisions as to foreign policy, and someone who will build a team that will take this country where it needs to go. So thank you so much for listening, and we've got our next speaker up. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much, Supervisor Hewitt. Our next speaker is our 2012 vice presidential candidate. He was a Superior Court judge in California for many years. He's led the fight in cannabis reform. He's a prolific writer. He's got his books over there. Buy those. All proceeds go to the Jo Jorgensen campaign. And he's one of my favorite people in the world. Come on up here, Judge Gray. Or should I say Jim? He tells me I call him Judge Gray too often.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you indeed. And welcome. It's nice to have good people here. But if you think about it, ain't it awful? You know, we have so much debt in our country. We're having our soldiers off in battles fighting. We don't even know what the... Let me ask a question. Does anyone here know what the goals are for our troops now in Afghanistan? Anybody? But they're still there. You know, we have schools that are failing our... I mean, isn't it... We have polarization like we've never seen. But I wish that we could... Oh, wait a minute. There is hope. There is hope. We have Jorgensen's Cohen campaign for president, vice president of the United States of America that will unify our country. We need unification. We need a president that will represent everybody, not just the people that they're supporters, but they will represent America. They will make America, in effect, whoops, from the bottom up. They will make America live that dream. We are still becoming America, but we haven't for the last number of years. But I'm proud to say that I am a libertarian. We do believe in liberty, and in fact, I've written a musical. It's called Convention, the Birth of America, and it talks about the U.S. Constitutional Convention. And they bickered, they fought, they were people too, they had their problems, but each one to a delegate believed the most important function of government is protecting our liberties from the encroachment of government. What about that? That's what Jo Jorgensen stands for. That's what Spike Cohen stands for. So I know that I can get riled up because this is something I can really, really talk about successfully. In fact, I tell young attorneys, the most important part of public speaking is showing your audience you believe what you're saying. At least I can do that, and I know that we can. Yes, thank you, Mimi. I do have 2 books. They are for sale out there, and we need to rebrand the Libertarian Party. I'm doing the best I can, because if you ask Joe voter out there what the term libertarian means, oh, greedy, oh, survival of the fittest, that sort of thing, nuts to that. We need to mainstream the thought because we're the only political party in the country that's in the mainstream of American political thought today. Responsibility, taking care of our children, getting out of these unnecessary wars. So yes, one of these was just released this past week. It's called All Rise, the Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. Sleep this word libertarian in. And the other is 2 paragraphs for liberty, solutions that are practical, effective, responsible, libertarian. So they are out there, $20 a piece. All of them proceeds go to the campaign. Let's bring on our campaign. Let's bring on Jo Jorgensen. Let's first bring on my friend Mimi. But thank you for being here. Let's give her all the support that she is entitled to. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Gray. So I just want to thank everybody again for being here today. I want to thank our host, Bruheim. I want to thank our caterers. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Supervisor Hewitt and Judge Gray. But without any further ado, we know you are all here with her, and she is here for us. Your next President of the United States, Dr. Joe Jorgensen.
Thank you so much, Mimi. And thank you so much, California. This is just great. Thank you for the sun shining, but I guess it never rains here, right? So I'd like to start off by telling you about my grandmother, because she's the one who gave me the love I have of my country. She's the one who taught me American values and explained that, you know what, in the old country, she was an immigrant, in the old country, it didn't matter how much money you made, and it didn't matter if you worked a second or third job, because the government took it from you. They made sure that everybody was the same. And listening to her, it sounds like she might have come from, I don't know, Soviet Union, an Eastern Bloc country, but actually she came from Denmark. And unfortunately, our country is headed towards Denmark more and more every day. And we can't let the politicians in charge keep us going in that direction. I'm here to tell you that I think you know best what's best for your life, and that's why I'm asking for your vote for President of the United States. As your president, I will get government out of the way so my grandmother's vision of the American dream can be a reality for us all. Our current government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. And besides, what gives them the right? We need to put the decision-making power back into your hands, because you know better than any bureaucrat or politician or special interest what you need. You know better than anybody else. Americans would never budget $80 billion to keep Americans from their loved ones, but that's what they're doing in their attempt to have a criminal justice system. We cannot claim to be the land of the free when we lead the world in the world's incarcerations. You're right, Mimi. It is interesting hearing yourself 10 seconds later. we have 5% of the world's population, but house 20% of its prisoners. One of the biggest factors in the quadrupling of our prison population since 1980 is the racist and destructive war on drugs. In particular, mandatory minimums have taken discretion out of the hands of judges and instead forced mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, to be put in jail for 10, 20 years, sometimes even a lifetime, for a supposed crime that has no victim. Now, all we have to do is take a step back to the Prohibition era to see the parallels. Despite realizing how poorly alcohol prohibition went, what we've done is create a carbon copy. Drug kingpins have replaced mob bosses, and drug dens have replaced speakeasies. When was the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going up and down the halls of a high school trying to push gin on high school students? When's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses in order to support a vodka habit? Or when's the last time you heard of two liquor store owners having a shootout over the best corner? What we have now is not a drug problem. What we have is a prohibition problem. There should be no law to prevent you from owning an object, whether it's a gun to protect yourself or drugs for whatever reason you wish. If there is no victim, there is no crime. As your president, I will federally decriminalize all drugs and encourage states to treat drug use as a health issue, not a criminal one. We should allow the medical community to deal with substance abuse in a way that salvages lives instead of throwing them away. Accordingly, I will pardon anyone convicted at the federal level of victimless crimes. These are just a few steps towards ending the over-incarceration of people of color and letting consensual adult activities become safer and destigmatized. In addition to overcrowding our federal prisons, the war on drugs has negatively affected our communities and the interactions that many people have with police. The drug war has single-handedly created gangs that police themselves, often through violence. Consequently, the federal government has created a police state, including the Drug Enforcement Administration, which takes over $3 billion of our tax dollars annually. They have repeatedly raided medical marijuana clinics in states where medical marijuana is completely legal. And long gone is a friendly patrol officer who walks the beat and knows everyone by name. Instead, the federal government has imported nameless, faceless SWAT teams that have made Americans feel like enemy combatants in their own streets. And it doesn't stop with the DEA. In recent months, we've had the Department of Homeland Security, which receives another $50 billion in tax dollars, patrolling our streets in military fatigues. As your president, I will defund federal involvement in policing, including the DEA and DHS. That means ending the supplying of surplus military equipment like tanks and tear gas to over 8,000 federal, state, and local police forces. I will end no-knock raids, which too often end up killing innocent people like Breonna Taylor. And as Libertarian Congressman Justin Amash said, when police do misbehave, it is nearly impossible to take legal action because of an arcane doctrine known as qualified immunity, which states that victims can only successfully sue an officer when clear civil rights violation has already been established in a prior case. When I am president, I will end qualified immunity so that police can be held to the same standard as everyone else. While millions of Americans have suffered from the government's war on drugs, almost every American has suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic in some way. South Korea confirmed its first case within about a day of our first case, and they quickly had testing and contained the spread. As infections in the US skyrocketed, South Korea nearly eradicated COVID-19, and they did so without any lockdowns. A testing initiative by Bill Gates, which by the way was the first that could be done out in the US outside of a hospital, processed 20,000 cases over 10 weeks. But on May 12th, the FDA stopped them from further testing and said they needed, quote unquote, further assessment. This is just one example of how the FDA has worsened the COVID-19 crisis and made it extremely difficult for anyone to get testing. Currently, only those companies with enough money and resources can even get FDA approval. And once they do, they weaponize their patents, holding a monopoly. It costs about $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and thanks to the FDA, it's about a 10-year process. Meanwhile, it's the patients who are desperately waiting for a drug that just might save their lives. New medicines and procedures should get to patients as quickly and safely as possible. When I am your president, I will get rid of the FDA efficacy requirement, if not the FDA entirely. The FDA is not the only issue with the American healthcare system. Let's be honest, it's not working for anyone. And my heart breaks for the millions of Americans who've been left behind, those whose families have been bankrupted. Now, for decades, we've heard politicians in Washington blame it on the free market system, saying therefore we need a single payer system. Well, I have news for them. We haven't had anything close to a single payer system in nearly a century. The alternative to our current big government failure isn't an even bigger government failure. And when politicians say we need Medicare for all, what I hear them say is we need VA hospital for all. This top-down monopoly isn't acceptable for anyone, especially those who are willing to risk their lives to save our country. We cannot wait for government bureaucrats to decide who lives and who dies. We have to put the power back into the hands of people, back into the hands of the patient. Now, as I see it, the biggest problem with our healthcare system is our insurance isn't really insurance at all. In any other industry, insurance only pays for unexpected costs. Therefore, costs are held relatively low. Our healthcare system, though, is so broken, it pays for everything. So imagine if your car insurance paid for gas, oil, or car washes. First of all, you would have absolutely no reason to shop around for the best gas prices. In fact, heck, you might go to the most expensive place because what do you care? You just pay your $5 little copay card and off you go. Therefore, gas stations would have absolutely no reason to compete. In fact, they could raise their prices without you even knowing it because they'd simply pass the costs on to the insurance companies. And then what do? The car insurance companies would simply raise your premiums the following year. This cycle is exactly what's going on in our healthcare system. Patients have no reason to shop around for the best price. Consequently, health providers have no reason to compete on price. Insurance companies can charge higher prices without any accountability, and we're the ones left footing the bill. The best example of how a free market system can work would be in Singapore, which, by the way, Indiana, the state of Indiana, has incorporated a similar system. In Singapore, their prices, healthcare prices, are about a third of what our costs are. And their doctor visits are $10, less than our copay. The state of Indiana has increased the number of people using generic drugs from 10% up to 90%. And the best part is the people were glad to do it because they got to keep the savings. That's the way it works in a free market system. If you shop for groceries, a computer, a car, it doesn't matter. If you find a better price, you get to keep the savings. I want to see the VA healthcare system converted into something like this. Let's put dollars in the hands of veterans and let them decide how and where and when to use them. Give the power back to the veterans. The government letdown of our soldiers doesn't begin with health care. It starts from the time they enlist. There are soldiers currently deployed who weren't even born when the war on terror began. The United States spends more on its military than the next 7 countries combined. We are in nearly 150 countries around the globe. And what do we have to show for it? In the last 20 years alone, over 500,000 people have died in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, including 250,000 civilians. These are mothers and fathers and children who will never return home. In every election, candidates promise peace, but they only deliver more war. If I'm elected president, my first official act will be to bring the troops home. I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. We have to support our borders. We need to have a strong military defense for that. But we need to stop meddling around the world and make peace with our world neighbors. The military budget, unfortunately, is far from the only example of how government has misdirected our economy. The IRS taxes Americans at every turn, and the tax system is so complicated that only those who can afford a personal accountant or tax lawyer can even navigate the code. And that same IRS that taxes us to death probes into every personal financial decision we make. Meanwhile, the government itself accumulates more debt. Now, we've got some people in Washington say we need to increase military spending, while the other half say we need to increase domestic spending. So what's our bipartisan compromise? They simply increase all spending. As your president, my veto pen is going to need a lot of extra ink. Runaway spending is also made possible by the Federal Reserve. When the federal government isn't able to raise taxes, it simply prints more money. Without any backing, since the Fed was created over a century ago, The American dollar has lost 96% of its value. We need to reduce regulations to allow cryptocurrency and any other form of currency to enter the market. As your president, I will first audit and then end the Federal Reserve. I will eliminate the IRS and work with Congress towards eliminating the federal income tax altogether. It's time to move money out of the hands of government and back into the people who earned it. Politicians and bureaucrats don't know what you need. You do. And when it comes to cutting spending, we can't take any options off the table. I would encourage baseline budgeting. So instead of assuming an increase, we start at 0 every year and then decide what's vital. Now, given the challenges we face as a country, it's easy to feel like the changes I'm talking about just can't happen. But I believe they can because I believe in you. I believe in the individuals who make up our great country. I see America through my grandmother's eyes, a place where the rights of the individual are far greater than the power of government, a place where liberty means minimum government and maximum freedom, a place where the American dream isn't a dream at all. It's real and it's right there in front of you because you made it happen. As I ask for your vote this November, it's not because I'm asking you to cast a vote for me. Instead, I think you should vote for you. You know best how to spend your money. You know best what your family priorities are. You know best what's best for you. So thank you very much. And I would love to take some questions.
Thank you, everyone. We have about 30 minutes for Q&A.
Wow.
We'll start here in the VIP room for questions, and then we'll migrate over into the overflow area. So if you have a question, please speak clearly into the microphone. We will not be doing any follow-ups to allow some time for selfies. And one question at a time per person, and if you can keep them brief. So who would like to start off with questions in this room? And share your name, please.
Dawn Brocious, and I'm kind of interested in your position on mandatory vaccination.
So I made the decision. I chose to vaccinate my daughters, and my daughter has vaccinated my grandchild. However, having the government require that, I think, is just one of the most egregious things that it could do. You know, a lot of times we talk about how it's not fair that they don't allow us to use the drugs we want to. They don't allow us to gamble. They don't allow people in, to use sex into sex work. There are so many things the government doesn't allow us to do. But having somebody to forcibly put something in your body, I'm surprised it's even a question. So, and even though I vaccinated my children, I think herd immunity is a ridiculous reason to tell somebody else they have to put something into their body. So, completely against it. Thanks.
So I'm Caitlin, and I just wanted you to talk about, we all know Social Security is just awful. So
Right.
What is your alternative? Because some people get scared about it going away, and they don't understand why it's so messed up in the first place.
Yes, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I got the nomination is because I do think that we need to take care of the people who've paid in. I mean, after all, these people had money taken out of their paychecks before they even received it. So for the people who are already dependent on it, the older people, if they want to stay in it, what I want to do is, their money wasn't put into a lockbox for safekeeping like Al Gore was talking about. Instead, it was spent on things it shouldn't have been spent on, such as, downtown fancy office buildings. So what I would do is I would sell the government assets, fancy office buildings, oil rights, mineral rights, sell it, raise the money so that people would get a lump sum and they would be in charge of it instead of Congress. And for everybody else who knows they're not going to see anything from it, I would give them an immediate opt-out so they can get a system that does work. So I would encourage anyone to look at Cato's 6.2% solution, which is what ours is based on. Thanks.
Joe, if you were invited to a presidential debate with either one or both of the other major candidates, Would you accept that, and why?
Would I accept it? Yes, so that Americans can see that they have a real alternative, and I would be the only alternative. I've been telling people hashtag fake debates. We hear the media call them two old rich white guys. That's the least of the problems. The real problem is they both want to spend your money. They both want to make decisions for you. Neither one has an answer to the crushing healthcare costs. And by the way, neither one is going to bring the troops home. So I would be the only alternative. And you know, when we stopped on our bus tour, don't have the bus with us, but it's this pretty color blue. We stopped at a fuel stop, and the person at the gas station said, "Oh, wow, you're running for president? Who are you with, Trump or Biden?" And I said, no. I'm on the ballot in addition to them. You can vote for somebody other than Trump or Biden. He tells his friend, hey, there's somebody we can vote for outside of Trump or Biden. So that's what we need, is we need to have people find out they do have an alternative. Were you raising your hand? Okay.
This is Mark from Fullerton, California.
Hey.
Hi. So going along with what you just stated, right? So we need to have other voices on the debate. So mainstream media and just the American public, they don't get exposed to you. Mm-hmm. What is it that we can do as libertarians or as just the general people so that we can reform or change the debate committee or process so that somebody like you can be heard?
Well, I don't know that it's going to do much good to change that debate commission. And by the way, they've got this fancy name, you know, the commission for president, like it's some impartial government entity when it's a private institution, and most people don't know that. So, and many people have sued over the years. The most recent one was just a few months ago. We lost again. So we are trying to work to see if we can have a debate outside that. I don't know if we're going to be successful, but we're trying. But I think the biggest thing is to basically just tell all your friends and family, as many people as you can. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit I went to my bank a few years ago, and my banker didn't know I was running for president, which you would think. Now, granted, I'd not seen her since January, long before the nomination, so... but it's surprising how many people don't know there is another alternative. So social media, friends, family, just get out the word that you can, and we can hopefully get somewhere. Thanks.
Hi there.
Hey.
So my name is Joseph. I'm from San Diego County, and as a county right on the border, I would like to know if you could elucidate your position or your administration's policy on immigration and trade.
Yeah, well, immigration first. Full disclosure, 3 of my 4 grandparents are immigrants. They came to this country before the country shut down in the 1920s. We did have open borders before the 1920s, and things worked out fine, and that's what I want to return to. It's the way it was when my grandparents came over. And 2 of the biggest myths, crime and money. First of all, GDP goes up when immigrants come over. Secondly, the crime statistics from people born on foreign soil actually lower than crime rates for people born on American soil. And the trade policy is equal. It's immoral to tell anybody they can't trade with anybody else. And of course, when goods cross borders, troops don't have to. I'm sure you've heard that. So I want to be in a good relationship with every country around the world and just trade freely with everybody. Give everybody favored nation status.
Hi,
Hey.
I'm Harriet Gorin from Orange County. I know libertarians are split on the abortion issue, and I'm wondering what the libertarian line is right now.
Oh, well, because I am the presidential candidate, of course I'm supporting the Libertarian Party platform, plank by plank. There's not a single plank that's not in my platform. I mean, my platform is the Libertarian Party platform. And I do have a lot of people who do say, you know what, I would be in the Libertarian Party except you're pro-choice and I'm pro-life. And I explained to them, look, we had Dr. Ron Paul, who was a great candidate, and I point out that the Republican Party, which claims to be pro-life, actions speak louder than words. And if you look at Obamacare and you look at people voting dollars for Planned Parenthood, I point out that even the staunchest pro-choice libertarian would never spend a single penny of taxpayers' dollars for abortion because other people do think it's murder, and especially, like we all heard about the nuns with Obamacare who were forced to basically provide what they thought was murder. That's egregious, and we would never do that. So very few people vote on abortion only as an issue, and surprisingly, it hasn't come up too often. So that's good. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Ray. I live in Los Angeles, California. How would you unite the country, seeing how it is so divided right now?
What I've been telling people is, this is, and keep in mind, I've got a PhD, so I usually only say stuff if there's research. So I have to start this off with, this is my opinion. My opinion is that we're so divided because we do everything through government. And I think a good example would be education. Let's say you want prayer in your school, or vaccines, or masks, or whatever, and your neighbor doesn't. What you have to do is you have to battle it out with your neighbor. You have to each support your own candidate. You got to put money towards your candidate, go out, get all your friends to vote, and then on election day, one of you is going to win and one of you is going to lose, and it's going to be a one-size-fits-all. And wouldn't the libertarian way be much better when you keep your resources and you get to vote with your feet or vote with your dollars? That way you could choose to send your child to a school with prayer, and your neighbor could decide to send his child to a school without prayer, and you could get along. But right now, healthcare, retirement, education, whether or not we wear masks, no wonder we're at odds with each other, because it's one size fits all. And I've asked people, how would you like it if we all voted, should we all be vegetarians or should we all eat steak? And that sounds ludicrous. Imagine how polarized we'd be then. And that sounds ludicrous, but think about how personal vaccines or school or religion are. So of course we're polarized. So I think if we get government out of the way and allow people to just get along with each other how they want, I think we'd be much better off. Thanks.
Okay, we are over in the general admission area for Q&A. If you want to line up over by the bar, we'll go ahead and take questions for about 15 more minutes from over here.
Go ahead. Is it ready now? Oh, my name is Jane, and I'm from Orange County. And thanks for coming out here to California today. I was just wondering, there's a lot of people of color who have been in the criminal system,
Yes.
as far as being in prison and jail for decades for crimes that they didn't commit, and a lot of it due to racism. And I was wondering how you're going to help those people get the justice that they deserve. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Well, first of all, and you're absolutely right. And it's so frustrating to see the debate now because people are saying, we don't have racism inherent in the system. Well, we certainly do in the criminal justice system, where drugs that people of color tend to use have longer prison sentences that drugs that whites tend to use are. And whites and blacks tend to use drugs at about the same rate, but we've got about 6 times as many blacks in prison. So absolutely there's something going wrong. As I mentioned, I would, at the federal level, release the people, anybody of victimless crimes, whether it's drugs, sex work, gambling, whatever. And then I would order the states to do it. Now, if this gets into, and let me step back and say, I think it's really important that the federal government not go into the states, because that's part of our problem, is the federal government has gotten too big and taken away a lot of the authority of states and local issues. However, just like George Wallace, when he stood on the steps of the University of Alabama and the federal government had to step in and say, no, black students need to be allowed in there. If it gets to that point where the governors weren't doing their job of restoring civil rights, then yes, I would get in and do something. Thanks.
Hi, Joe. I'm Brian from Paramount, California.
Hey, I wonder if
A lot of liberals see a top-down policy in capitalism, and you hate top-down policies. How
Yes.
do you see that as not having top-down government, but a top-down capitalism policy is okay?
Top-down capitalism, did you say? Well, I would say top-down capitalism, by definition, isn't capitalism at all. I would suggest that those people are getting their power from the government. True capitalism works bottom up. And for instance, I've had people ask me, well, should the Justice Department or somebody go after Facebook and break them up? And I say no. If you look at IBM, they were, the Justice Department had a suit against them for something like 13 years during the entire 70s because they were so big that nobody could compete with them. However, two guys out of their garage were able to do what the Justice Department didn't, which is to break them up. I would say that that's real capitalism, not the kind where corporations get their special interests, like we saw with COVID-19, when the government allowed big corporations and big box stores to stay open, but the mom and pop stores couldn't. So unfortunately, capitalism was one of these words that now nobody knows what it means, and that's one thing that I would like to do, at least as a candidate, if not president, is restore that, and if nothing else, explain it. Thanks.
Hi, Jeb.
Hey.
Just with the way that everything is going with
there you are.
Oh, I'm over here.
I
How's it
can
going?
see you, yes,
Yeah, hey.
okay.
With the way that everything is going with the COVID situation and like all the information that keeps coming out and how there's a bunch of different like wear masks, no masks, and all this other stuff. With your plan to handle the COVID, how do you get people to trust like the information that they're being told coming from your administration?
I would hope people wouldn't trust what's coming from the government, actually. I would tell them to trust their doctors and not trust anything coming out of any administration. So that would be my short answer.
Hi, Joe.
Hey.
I'm Lucas from Orange. One of the more concerning problems I see in America is the lack of understanding of the benefits of the free market economy. What would
Yes.
you do as president to help increase, if anything, economic literacy amongst Americans?
Well, the good news is I don't think you have to increase the literacy if you just get government regulation out of the way, because people do act in their own self-interest. And by the way, my field is psychology, and I understand that if you're not acting in your self-interest, then you really do have a problem. So people in their, look at what happened in Russia, Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union said, okay, from each to each, we've all heard that line. I know I'm not shortening it because that's what Joe Biden does when he forgets. I'm just trying to save time, although I guess explaining it took longer time. But what happened in the Soviet Union was they were starving, and so they said, okay, fine, we'll let you own a little plot out back, and you can have your own gardens. 3% of the farmland in the Soviet Union produced 30% of the food. So people, when they're given the freedom, they know what they need to do, and that's what's so great about the invisible hand is we don't have to explain it. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Dr.
Hey.
Jorgensen. As a Jew, one of the biggest questions that, obviously I have is the question of Israel and Palestine. And I want to know, what is your stance on the issue of Israel and Palestine? And then additionally, what can you do and what can you bring that has been done to help resolve the issue so we can get some sort of peace or common ground between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Well, you may not like the answer, but one giant Switzerland means one giant Switzerland. We are armed and neutral. President Trump has been bragging about his brokered peace deal, but as you know, not everybody's happy with it. It doesn't matter what side we're on over there. It's going to cause problems. So I'm going to be Switzerland, and if American individuals want to help one government or one group of people with their money, with their donations, they're more than welcome to. But not as, as a country, as a government, the United States would not become involved. And I think that we will have much greater peace and then not have such the risk that we had when we had 9/11. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Joe. My name is Eddie from Monrovia. My question is, I believe the biggest issue facing Americans is the national debt. It's upwards of 20 trillion. So if you become president, what would you do to tackle the national debt? Would you scale down on spending? And how would you do that with taxation and bringing in revenue from the federal government?
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, it's at least 25, if not 27 trillion. And what's funny is when, I mean, not funny, but heartbreaking is more the word, excuse me. When I was the VP candidate in 1996, I talked about how we had this horrible $5 trillion debt, and how were we ever gonna get ourselves out of that? And now I look back and 5 trillion seems rather quaint. But yeah, so the way to get yourself out of a hole is, first of all, to stop digging. So gotta stop digging, gotta stop spending. The military, and let me remind you, I want to have the military defend our shores, okay? Not a pacifist. We need to defend our shores. But if we stop being everywhere else in the world, we could cut out about $700 billion, and we would still be tied for most money spent in the entire world on military. We've also got to stop other spending, such as the Department of Education. Education is local. There shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. I would also stop foreign aid to foreign countries. There's an old joke that basically that's money that goes from poor taxpayers to rich dictators. We got to stop that and let Americans make their own decisions. But sometimes, speaking about the 700 billion, I have people say, really, but France is our friend. Shouldn't we stay in France? And my answer is, we're told how great France is because they all get 5-week vacations. Well, maybe we'd get 5-week vacations too if we weren't paying for their military. So we need to cut it at all levels. Thanks.
Hi, Dr. Joe. My name is Andres. I'm from Montclair, California. My question might be delegated to state or local officials, but I'm just kind of wondering, what would you do or what kind of ideas would you bring to the table to combat homelessness? California has a huge homeless population, and so as a libertarian, I'm thinking, what kind of ideas do you have to implement to kind of combat that as that community tends to increase?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And you're right, that is more of a state and local issue. I can tell you that Orlando, Florida, has been doing a good job with what they've been doing. At the federal level, there's not as much that we can help with, but we can do our part as far as like the ridiculous federal housing laws to make housing more affordable. But you're absolutely right, more of that's at the state and local, which is why I love it when I hear libertarians running at all levels. And anybody running here at a state or local level, I suggest you look at Orlando, where they've got a pretty good thing going on. So thanks.
Hi, my name is Sidabe. I'm from Anaheim. I just want to know, how do you balance protecting people with giving them their freedom? Because I know that's an issue for a lot of people. They feel with the lack of regulations, they might feel unsafe. How do you respond to that?
Do you have any specific examples of how they could feel unsafe?
For example, with building regulations and building codes and stuff like that, people want the freedom to build whatever they want, and
I see.
If they have a business, they would want to have the freedom to do that. But what about safety?
Yeah. So most of that again is state and local. But what I would say is the free market does a much better job of policing themselves than the federal government does. And if we look at, for instance, like the FDA, the government said, oh, let's protect people. Let's get an FDA. Let's make sure drugs are safe. And what has it done? It has delayed drugs getting to us, and it's made us less safe, not more safe. And we can go down the line. There are so many things like that. And was that my last question, Jess? Oh, Okay, since you were here, I was wondering. So let me just, I'm sure people here have heard of people buying off government, health inspectors and so forth. What happens if you were to buy off somebody in a private industry? Then they would probably go out of business. What if you kept going to, let's say, Yelp or Zagat or whatever for restaurant reviews, and they gave 5 stars and they were actually lousy? You would stop going. So, and they would go out of business because they're held accountable, whereas the government's not. And let me give you just one quick example. If you've ever looked, like if you plug in a light socket sometimes, there's a little UL Underwriters Laboratory. Oh, you're trying to help me. Oh, that's okay. Thank you. I was wondering, I thought maybe there's media over there and they're trying to hold up signs. I'll be fine, thank you, but I appreciate your being so sweet. Comes with the campaign trail, sunstroke. But the Underwriters Laboratory has been doing this for decades, making sure that the electrical plugs are safe, and it's not government run. So I would like to see more of that, not less of that. Thanks. No more questions?
My name is David, and I'm from Fresno, California. And my question is, what is you going to do about DACA recipients? They've been on DACA for 8 years and are starting citizen, and they haven't been offered a path to citizenship.
Oh, you mean immigration? Oh, DACA. Oh, yeah, no, when we open up the borders, they're welcome to stay. Yeah, no, everybody's welcome, just like my grandparents were. I can give a short answer even though I'm a teacher.
All right, that was the last question. And
Okay.
Dr. Jorgensen's going to come around and meet and greet with those of you that are here until we
Thank you.
will have to depart.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your warm welcome.
We're now in the final stages.